Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sesh. Sesh is the first student-led podcast series from UNCW's Department of Communication Studies that highlights action sports leaders and legends. We come from Com 395. It's an action sports focused class, and it is taught by Norb Garrett, and we just learn everything about the industry. We interview these people, and we also have a survey team that collects information about action sports from people here in Wilmington. So we do spotlight leaders and legends shaping the world of action sports and culture, one conversation at a time here on Sesh podcast. My name is Christina Laeta, and I'm here with my co-host, Isabel Elmore.
Thank you, Christina. I'm happy to be here. Last week, we sat down with CEO and co-founder of Unlisted, Miss Candy Harris. For our episode today, we're sitting down with two amazing guests, all who run action sports-related magazines, and they also worked for our amazing professor. So please help me welcome Mr. Pat Bridges with Slush Magazine and Mike Rogge with Mountain Gazette.
Thank you, guys. We're very excited to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to join us. I want to get right into the first question, which is, how do you think print media has changed since you started in the business?
Okay, I can start with that one because, frankly, I've probably gone through a couple more changes than Mike Rogge has because I've been in it a little bit longer. To take it all the way back, I started in print media in the mid-90s, much like yourselves, right around when I was in college, but some of my colleagues who were in college at the University of Vermont, we decided to team up and start an independent, sort of like a zine on steroids, regional magazine in Burlington, Vermont, and it was called EI. And back then it was at a time, concurrently with print media, like skiing has changed, MySpace, snowboarding has changed, and snowboarding was booming. So much so that it could sustain not only a healthy, preeminent mainstream global print media product, but also it could support regional. So what we did with EI was kind of the equivalent today of some hybrid between a website and being an influencer channel on social media or a YouTube channel. So we were just kind of speaking to a niche within a niche, but that's probably how it's changed the most, in that it's gone full circle. Whereas when print media was dominant, big, established, everybody got their news through print media, it has gone full circle to now it's not big, not dominant, but you're able to speak to a niche and be supported within a niche. I think to the audience, the biggest change in print media has been that it's been something that has been targeted specifically to the people who are the highest engaged snowboarders, the people who really identify most with being a snowboarder, thrive for the content. I think that's where print is now, whereas in the 90s when I started, you weren't getting snowboarding on the Olympics, you weren't getting snowboarding on the X Games, you certainly weren't getting snowboarding in the social media feed or even on a website. You had to go to the magazines to see what the trends were, to see what progression was, to hear the storytelling, to get the vicarious thrills that were innate in travel pieces, to see what was going on beyond the horizon of your local hill. You had to pick up a magazine. Today, you got that in your pocket. That's probably been the biggest change. But on the other side of it, technology has enabled, it has broken down a lot of the barriers. There's a phrase, dinosaurs will die. During the peak of print media, it was the domain of conglomerates. You had the Condé Nast, you have the Times Mirrors, but now it's back to the independents. It's back to the people who are living it, the people who bleed for it. And with technology, full disclosure, when I started, photos were on slides. You had to have a loop, you had to look at a slide. Magazines were laid out with X-Acto blades and graph paper. Now it's all done on a computer. Or it could be done on a phone. Certainly the pictures are taken with phones and stuff. So it's been very democratized as of late, meaning you can distribute a magazine, you can send an email, you can Google printers, all everything that you need to do to make a print magazine, it's demystified. It's all at your fingers. It's all available on the World Wide Web, and it's available instantaneously. And the other big thing, particularly in niche printing, is one, the domestic printers are much more sympathetic to the small and to mid-sized printers, because those big web presses aren't being run by the Time magazine or the Sports Illustrated. They're just not. And the dirty secret of the printing business is, if those web presses aren't running, then they're losing money. So they'll sit there and call me and Mike back, and we'll tell them, hey, we need 10 to 50,000 magazines printed. And we become a priority in this day and age because they got to keep those magazines printed. But the other side of it, with other magazines like Surfer's Journal and Golfer's Journal and these more high end, no, Mike's is pretty high end. Ours is a higher quality than I've ever worked with. China, you can get your magazines printed in China, where the advantage is a lot less environmental regulations. But yeah, so a lot of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that business has changed. Economically, though, print is, you got to be really strategic and clever to sell advertising in print in this day and age. You've got to have a concise message and value proposition for people to want to support print.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pat and I have successful magazines with different magazines, I would say. My value prop for advertisers is simply, we don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of like playing hard to get. I mean, you guys are in college. Playing hard to get is a great way to find a partner, a friend, whatever. You're laughing now, but
yeah.
I think what's changed the most is that, I graduated college in 2008, and so I was my freshman year was when Facebook was launched as a college-only tool. They later allowed the military to get in there, but very slowly they were rolling out like it was this exclusive place you could be. And I was actually hired at Powder to be a digital person and to run Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all these accounts that were going to be really important to us. And what ended up happening is, I think magazines became too reliant on those platforms for traffic. And as Facebook and Meta, now Meta, like, kept changing the rules, we kept having to like chase, and that's something that hasn't changed actually in media forever, is people have always been chasing the car, like a dog chasing a car. The funny thing is, I don't know what they ever would have done if they caught it. So what I wanted to do is, when I was at Powder, I remember thinking we used to have to do 100 things just to do the one thing we wanted to do, which was tell really cool stories about powder skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided to charge people for it. Mountain Gazette's $90 a year for 2 issues. There are 192 pages. We're unapologetic about that. But what that allows for is 170 pages plus of uninterrupted editorial.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Pat in that it's a niche market. What's really fun though is this niche market is starting to really grow quite a bit. If you look at the National Magazine Awards this year, we got nominated for feature writing in the feature writing category, and we're up against the New Yorker, New York Magazine, the Atlantic. And what made me laugh is that on the page announcing all the nominees, we're the only one that doesn't have a hyperlink to the story, because you can only get it in print. And I think what you're seeing is a return to the value of physical media. I think your generation in particular, unfortunately, your parents have put your entire life on the internet, and you're probably desensitized to the internet and a little sick of it. And so what we found is we've joined sort of this Gen Z anti-tech thing of like, we know how to use tech, but we're not going to, we're not going to embrace it. I look at like a guy like Sturgill Simpson, who just hit number 3 on the Billboard last week with physical media only, selling vinyl records, cassette tapes. Like, I really do think that there's going to be a big pushback. Kodak is back with film. You're seeing more vinyl sold. So I think what's cool is, in a way, it's sort of returned to the value prop of, make something that's worth buying. Mm-hmm. And that's been our success at Mountain Gazette.
I've thought about that before when it comes to having pictures for my kids in the future. Like, am I just going to have like a flash drive that I can give to them and be like, oh, here's all my photos in my camera roll, like from this year to this year? I feel like that's just, it's too much to have to show somebody. So I do think that kids in our generation are so much more keen to start buying magazines, start buying CDs, vinyl records, because people want something that's tangible, not just for now, but for the future as well. Because we just have everything at our fingertips, it makes you kind of like lose sight of what's important almost when you're just like bombarded by all this information. So I think that our generation is super, super interested in physical media because it's just not so much. You can only have so much of it, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that because I love getting physical books. I know I have one of my best friends, she has a Kindle, which I think is great. Like you have access to a lot of books at one time, but it takes away from having that physical copy that you can keep forever and pull out whenever you want. So like I've started to make it a point that if I'm going to get a book, I'm going to buy it from a store, I'm going to put it on my shelf and I'm going to showcase it. And I did the same thing when I got y'all's magazines, and I do the same thing with records because I have a record player and my mama gave me some records. And then every time I go to like a thrift store or another store, I'll always look for records that I can put on my shelf and display because I love having those physical, actual things that I can keep and then pass down for generations instead of just like she said, here's a flash drive, have fun with it. You know, you actually have these physical things that you can pass down. And I loved that my mama could pass me down those records that she's had forever, and that means something to her, and pass them down to me, and then I can pass them down after that. So I just think that bringing that stuff back is great.
Mhm.
Well,
I think of it a little bit like one sec, Pat. I just want like I think of it a lot like you walk into someone's house, right, and you have a record collection, or you have magazines on the coffee table, or books on the shelf. I actually learned this from one of Pat and I's mutual friends, T-Bird, which he used to do on all his features. He used to go look on bookshelves, see what people had. What are you actually reading? What are you actually like into? Um, and then you have Spotify Wrapped, which I think we all get sick of about 30 minutes after it comes out at the end of the year. No one really cares that 90% of America listened to Taylor Swift exclusively last year. Like, it doesn't really matter. But if you have that Taylor Swift record or a couple of them or whatever on your vinyl player, you know, that says something like you're maybe a bigger fan, a real fan.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pat, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, the music analogy is a great one because when you talk about the pictures on a thumb drive, fact of the matter is a day can come sooner than later that you're not even going to be able to access that. I mean, Mike probably has hard drives. He doesn't even have the cords to connect them or the device that he would connect them to. You know, it's hard to get a cord from an old, Ethernet cord that goes to a lightning. Just doesn't exist. So it's interesting, like iPods, you've heard of these. They're now a dated device, but all the music you bought and put on an iPod, you no longer can access the minute that iPod dies. And it's the same thing with the photos shared in the cloud. And now what you're seeing with the Adobe suite and all this other stuff is you think stuff's on your desktop or even on your computer, but it's actually in the cloud. And the minute you stop paying for those services is the minute you no longer have access to stuff that you at one time thought was permanent. Yet print,
Right.
you can walk down to a thrift store in the town where you're at right now. You could go to the school library. You could grab a book that was printed in 1960. You can find a used book that was printed in the 50s, potentially. And that's something that you can't do with stuff that's ones and zeros and digital media or in the cloud necessarily. I mean, we all can lament. I mean, I lament there's people who passed away who I had emails from. But whether I'm migrating from Entourage to Outlook or something, I lost those emails from 25, 30 years ago. That's not the case with something that's physical, which is why there's a whole field called archaeology, you know? So we'll see when digital archaeologists become a thing, which they probably already are. But yeah, no, there is a permanence to print. But Mike brought up an interesting point where he's talking about reader support. I use the phrase reader support, where reader support is merch or preeminently subscription sales. When I was coming up in media, this is a big way that it's changed. Subscription sales were a lost leader. magazines would sell subscriptions for $5 to $10. There's stuff such as these big companies, Publishers Clearinghouse, that would sit there and just sell it. And that was all driven by something called CPM. In your media department, do you talk about CPM?
It's unfamiliar to me, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my company is called Contact Point Media, and it's not a coincidence that the initials are CPM. CPM goes all the way back, and it incorporates some Roman numerals. It's cost per thousand. And basically what that is for an advertiser, how much does it cost the advertiser to reach 1,000 readers or 1,000 viewers on social media or 1,000 viewers of a video? Like, what does that sponsor or that advertiser or that, whoever's paying for that, how much do they pay to get 1,000 views, so to speak, or reads? When I started, the goal was to get as many subscribers and as much distribution as possible, because the more people that saw your magazine, theoretically, the more money you could charge for the advertising. So if you lost money on the readers, you made money on charging more for ads as that readership grew, because there's $5, $10 subscriptions. Where print media on its scale really lost the plot a bit, or was a little too late to really understand that, is in an era of social and digital media where you're not killing trees, you're not putting ink on the page, you're not putting a bunch of magazines in the back of a truck and driving them to a Hudson News. In an era of instantaneous digital and social and video media, you're never going to compete, particularly with free videos, subscription based. You're never going to compete with advertisers on a CPM, cost per 1,000 view basis. Print media had a real hard time adjusting to that fact. And so that's where Mike's at, where he's selling magazines for $60 to $90 a pop, or I'm selling subscriptions, which are 4 issues for $50, whereas when I came up, the magazines, you'd get 8 magazines for $10, including shipping, where we passed the shipping on. So reader support has shifted the paradigm, where advertising, it just enables the printing and the distribution, but where you make your profit and your margin and growth is in subscriptions and sales and collabs and merchandise and stuff like that. That's been a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you were going to say?
I would just say that I think what happened with the democratization of the internet was that we got a lot of crap. It turns out when everyone has a microphone, not everyone has something great to say. And I think the last time I got on the internet to have like a good time was probably 2004. It's just like, it's hard to get on any social platform and not get tossed in this. And so it's like, sure, you can reach 1,000 people, but are they really people now with AI bots? Mm-hmm. What quality person are they? Were they ever going to buy a product? Our metric that we go to our few ad partners with is our readers don't want to be inundated with ads. They respect quality. They want something at a high price point because they feel like that reflects quality. And I think the thing that maybe we were missing is there was this phrase in skiing forever: there's no money in skiing. That's insane. People will pay $14,000 to $20,000 a week to go heli skiing. Like, there's certainly a lot of money being captured in skiing. And I felt that in all of outdoor sports, I mean, it's over $100,000 to go up Everest with a Sherpa, and that's the cheap one. You might not live if you go up for that price. I think there was a fine line, and I'll keep this quick so you guys can get to your questions, but there's a fine line between charging what a product is worth and selling out. And I think for a long time, if you were making money in action sports, you were a sellout. And I'm 40. I don't want to sleep on couches anymore. I don't want to, I'm not ashamed that we are the largest, independent print magazine in North America. That's been validated by third parties for us, and we do charge what we charge. But at the same time, if someone doesn't want it, they can cancel at any time. Whereas I feel like Instagram and TikTok, there's some barriers to canceling. As you said, like you'd end up getting rid of all your stuff, all your memories and everything on there. So just a different way of doing things. But sorry, Pat and I could actually talk about this without the two of you forever. That's not what we're here for now.
It's totally fine.
No, we have. And like Mike and I talked about other magazines in the space at times, whether it's Whalebone, which is no longer around, but like a classic magazine like Cream. I've actually, in addition to Mike, I've had other people reach out to me about Cream, which is a music magazine from the 60s and 70s that's trying to come back. So we back channel and have these, we talk shop quite often. So
yeah.
I have like an old Rolling Stone magazine that has Jimmy Page on the front. And I also have one with Jim Morrison. And like, it's funny that people like our age are like, oh my God, like that's so cool. Like, where'd you find this? And I'm like, if you go to any thrift store, if you go to an antique market, like people still have print. Like people sell photos of random people from the 1900s. Like this stuff doesn't just like dissipate. Like you don't just burn it. You don't just like toss it. There's so much print still in this world. You just have to find it now. But like, especially with magazines like this, like it's not like a Teen Beat magazine that you just like toss in the trash after you've done all the quizzes. Like these are quality. So like this sort of print, yes, it might be more expensive, but it will last for such a long time because it's not just like a throwaway magazine. It's like, it's permanent,
Well, that's nice to hear. I mean, the other thing is, I think a lot of people don't even realize how often they see print. Granted, it's not what me and Mike do, but when you're leaving the grocery store, you're going to see a couple racks, whether it's particularly in a college town, you've got those sort of independent newsprint type of magazines out there. People see this stuff. And everybody who goes to an airport sees a newsstand, probably sees 5 of them, but they just don't register because they haven't been incentivized to go to that newsstand. Because frankly, 90% of the stuff that's on that newsstand at the airport, like Mike said when he was nominated for the award, you can get everything else that was nominated online. So why would you go to that newsstand if you know that the same information is widely available? But where it's different, and trust me, I deal with a younger staff that wants me to put everything we do online, and we do eventually. But if you want to get it within 6 months of it being printed, you got to get the physical mag. And to that end, you guys are in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have 260 partners in North America where people go to get our magazine for free. What's interesting is that's where the advertisers see the benefit. And we do deal with over 100 different advertisers. It's because we distribute magazines for free to 260 snowboard shops in North America, as well as a couple of brew pubs and some summer camp, like indoor action sports, skate parks and stuff. But and we do both. Whereas Mike does, he's done an amazing job with going for the reader support, going for the high-end premium subscriptions. And to that end, he was correct. There are a lot of people with that income that can service that. But at the same time, it's like, if you don't snowboard, you're not going to know that Slush exists, because why are you going to walk into a snowboard shop unless you're interested in snowboarding? And that's a big difference for us as well. We're not trying to go to, any traditional Kroger's or Walmart or any of the newsstand packets at checkout where you see the National Enquirer,
Yeah, we sell 100% direct to our readers.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, it's funny, Pat uses the phrase reader support. We actually don't. We say support nonprofits by Mountain Gazette. Our mag's been profitable since our 3rd week in business, because it was always, we're only going to make what we can afford to make, and we're only going to make a limited. We've sold out of every issue. I see you have our fall issue on the table right there, and and your professor was asking me to send more of them, and we didn't have any more. And he was like, "Well, that's a good problem to have." So But you guys have some questions for us, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to ask the first one?
Yeah, so starting with you, Mike, we know that your motto is famously print ain't dead. So tell us what you've done to deliver on that promise and just really what that phrase means to you.
It goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about, just like it's tangible, it's around. I think the biggest thing we've done is we just don't put our stories online. And yet we're adding 900 to 1,100 new subscribers every single month. Um, you know, I kind of looked at it as there's endless streaming. Like, let's really go with that streaming metaphor for a while. We should hop on the riverbank of Facebook and Instagram and start chucking life rafts out to people and bringing them in and being, and we found actually quite a few people sign up for our email list. They're not quite sure if they subscribe to the magazine. Then they get off of our email list. They stop following us on social, but they keep subscribing to the magazine for years later. So we feel pretty good about that. And we are certainly like print evangelists in that way of just like, we just launched a sister company called Double Chair Publishing. We just put out our first book. We had 5,100 copies in about 4 months of a physical book that's priced appropriately. And it's, again, not sold in bookstores. It's sold directly through us. And I think that's been our big thing is just there's more things we want to make in the print space. Big challenge for us with our size at 11 by 17 is that we used to be able to work with pretty much any printer in the world. Now there's about 4 in the United States that we can work with that can print our size. And we looked at China, but we're printing in Missouri. So we'll probably stick with Missouri for now.
So I wanted to ask you another question about Mountain Gazette, because obviously the photography is amazing. When he handed these out in class, we were all like, oh my God, for every magazine, like they really are just so unique and stand out so much. So the cover of Mountain Gazette 204 is very minimal. It's a beautiful shot of someone skiing and it has very little text, but the phrase "when in doubt, go higher" appears on many of the covers, along with "print ain't dead." What does the slogan mean to you? And do you think you could tell us a little bit about the origin of that?
Yeah, "when in doubt, go higher" is a phrase that was created in 2006 by one of the Mountain Gazette contributors. I didn't know the magazine back then. And the idea was that I think the legend is that the story wasn't happening in Denver. And so he asked if he could have some budget to go up to the mountains, and went up to the mountains, and then there was a story waiting for him there. And so that was where "when in doubt, go higher" came from. It was literally just like go to a higher elevation. We've sort of reappropriated it into the idea of like stepping up your game, page count, word count. On the photo side, I think given, Pat and I have stood on a lot of half pipes, a lot of jumps, a lot of cornices, like a lot of peaks. The scale of these environments where we get to spend our life is pretty incredible. And then that's what led it. I mean, the photography in there is really great. What's funny is a lot of those photos have probably been on Instagram before. They just don't look as good on a really small iPhone. So that was the reason for us. We do only spreads and singles. We try not to do too many mosaics, but I hand that back to our contributors. They're out there, and that's the scale I think that all of their work was meant to be in, if not bigger.
I will say that, like, personally, I am not into skiing. I'm not into snowboarding. I've always been more of like a beach girl than a mountain girl. But like, even when we receive these magazines, it's like mind blowing. Like, you don't have to only be interested in these to appreciate them. So kind of like what you guys were talking about, how like people who are really only interested in these sorts of realms will buy the magazines. It's cool to see how they can affect people who are not interested, because I found myself sitting and reading every single one. I found myself, looking at each of the images and being like taken away by how beautiful they were. And I'm not into mountains. I'm not into snowboarding, but I am into these 2 magazines. So I think that's a test to how high quality they are.
As someone from the mountains, I found the magazine to be like beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like home. Like looking into the magazine, just seeing the mountains represented like that, it was just so beautiful, and I just loved it.
So our subscriber base is pretty interesting. Like we have over 7,000 subscribers in the New York metro area. We have a lot of subscribers in San Francisco, a lot of urban areas like Los Angeles, Seattle, Salt Lake City, is where we get the most, I guess, towards the mountains. But I think what it is that for a long time, those audiences were talked to in a way where it was like, oh, you're from New York, here's the top 10 hot tubs in Aspen, Colorado. When what they really want to do is like, they want to hear from someone like Pat about what it's like to be in Aspen for maybe the X Games from a different perspective, or they want to hear from an athlete that maybe didn't finish top 10, but like has an interesting backstory, or, was discovered in a unique way. I think the biggest thing, man, is we're like super connected digitally, but I feel like we're so disconnected in the real world that sometimes it's nice just picking up a magazine and being like, oh, Jim Morrison, who climbs and skis Everest, like he lost some family members very close to him. I've also lost family members that are close to me. Like that's makes him a little more relatable than just an Everest post.
For sure.
So for Pat, I wanted to ask you, because you kind of like mix the multimedia approach. So like print, socials, digitals, and events. So how does this work? Like, how do you balance working in digital media and print?
A lot of it comes out of just inheriting an opportunity with when I worked for Norb. When I worked for Norb, your professor, I have a guy who works for me named Norm, so I get a little confused at times. But the way I encapsulate it now and where we found a benefit is I say we speak to the audience wherever the audience is. Why we're called Slush the Magazine, and we're not really, but we are, is because we thought it when we were coming up with the name, how pretentious the magazine to say we're Slush the Magazine. It was like an inside joke. And now after I find myself having to type it out constantly, it becomes a real tax. I wish it was much less characters, but we speak to the audience wherever the audience is. We're not obtuse. We're not ignorant. We're not trying to sell buggy whips. We know that the mainstay of snowboarding conversations, as far as our space, where, happen on social media. They happen in the feed. They happen in the scroll. We know that. So we're going to service that. We're going to speak to that same audience, because a lot of it is like the journey of how somebody goes from trying snowboarding to identifying as a snowboarder. And I do want to say, you guys both might not, consider yourselves skiers. You might not consider yourselves snowboarders. But everything that we've created can be applied to like music, it can be applied to whatever your interest is. The beauty of what social media has enabled is, you can find those pockets of like-minded individuals. The challenge of social media is when that's all you do is sit in that space. But, we do events because I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of people who work at resorts, and I've been a part of a lot of events. And at this point, I've run a lot of events. So it's part of our toolkit and skill set. As far as making videos, that's a big part of our culture. So if we have the ability to promote videos, whether it's through digital, social, or print, why wouldn't we actually create the product that people want to watch anyways? And that goes back into the experiential. If we already know how to hold events on snow, we know how to hold a premiere in a city. None of this stuff is mystifying. There is no secret handshake to be able to learn how to do any of these things. We just know it. So why don't we do it? Now, that's why we do it. Where it really becomes beneficial and why we started really going here, like back in the day, our company didn't invest in our website. And it started to become a real problem with advertisers, because advertisers were like, well, we love your magazine, but one of your competitors is packaging the magazine with their website, so we're not going to advertise with you. So I took some of my budget and I dedicated the print magazine buyouts to hiring somebody to run the website. We did the same thing with video. It's, in this day and age, Mike is fortunate to be in a different place. But for us, people, there's, shared services. There's a lot of, this is the back end of our space, the back end of any industry at this point. People are wearing a lot of hats. If they're not going to want to have a conversation with somebody in every single media channel. If they could have one conversation with somebody like me and speak to people on social media, speak to people in videos, speak to people experientially, they're going to go with the one conversation. And because they are going to support all of it, they're able to do that at a better efficiency, economically speaking, a more better use of the budget because they are doing a bigger package. And that's why we do everything. Like Mike says, print ain't dead. I don't subscribe to that, but I say it a lot because I go, print ain't dead, but it can't live on its own. Mm-hmm. And to that end, print is what distinguishes us. Anybody can have a social media feed. Anybody can put up a website, particularly in this day and age. Anybody can hold an event. Frankly, as easy as it is to make a magazine compared to back in the day, it's a lot harder than just sitting there and signing up and getting your own handle on Instagram or TikTok. Mm-hmm. It is a lot harder. You need to be considered. And because there's a cost associated with printing, buyouts, and shipping, you need to be discerning. You're not, if you know that page is going to cost you $500, whether it's buyouts, printing, shipping, you're going to spend $500 on that page. You're going to put a lot more thought into it than the 5 seconds you spent saying post and the 20 seconds you spent writing the caption. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we do all of it, is because we can. And where we found the best benefit is people in Europe, whether it's the time zone, language barrier, they're not going to make 5 calls when they can make 1 phone call. And I could sit there and speak to all the snowboarders in North America that they want to speak to, however those snowboarders consume content.
So like, to kind of go off of the idea of like, you could put everything in one, what do you think separates a good story from a great one? And this is for the both of you guys. Like, how do you choose what is worth to put in the magazine? Because you can't just post all of it online. You do have to kind of pick and choose what goes into that edition. So how do you guys choose between a good story and a bad story, with a good photo and a bad photo, or different interviews?
I'll let Mike start.
Mm-hmm.
We get 6,000 submissions per year. Mm-hmm. And those usually have 2 or 3 story pitches each. So it's over 12,000 stories that we consider every year. And I think for me, a big one is like, what cannot be done online? You know, we're big fans of the deep dive, of getting like the definitive story of XYZ, you know, I think when it comes to a lot of this media, you have to look at the incentives. So like, we have 192 pages. Mm-hmm. That's it. And we do that twice a year. So less than 400 pages per year, we have to make it count. Like, our incentive is to make it extremely, like, the magazine really good, extremely diverse as far as like topics go, extremely diverse as far as contributors go. We can't, I've always thought of media as food, you know, like we have to give people like a really well-balanced diet. We can't just do the sugared cereal, you know. I'm sure we could do a 190 page like Hammer photo gallery and people would think it was kind of cool, but I think they'd also like dismiss it pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think what makes a great story is it's got to be genuine. And I think we live in a time where 99% of our population is not genuine about anything they post. It's all performative. So we're just trying to put stuff in the magazine. It's not performative. I mean, I don't think the trips that people go on for Mountain Gazette are in any way performative. I mean, case in point, like I have 2 contributors that are getting back today from the Pacific Northwest. They spent 7 days there trying to find Bigfoot. Wow. And I'm not even kidding you.
That is great.
And we're writing a 15 to 20,000 word piece about the industry that is Sasquatch and Bigfoot and how exploitative it is and everything. But they also went up and like met with a lot of genuine people who think he's real. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I would love to see a social media post try to encapsulate how insane this story is going to be. And I mean, look at the smiles on your face. When's the last time an Instagram post made you smile like that? You know, I think we want to be clever, and that's part of what we do with our reader resources is we take the revenue that we're given from our readers, and we invest in pretty wild shit.
I was laughing because me and my papa, we have a inside joke about, he calls it Sasquatch like Daryl, and he's like, my sister Daryl's here, or brother Daryl's here, so we always make a joke about Sasquatch. And they were watching a show one time and people were trying to find him and they were just grasping at straws to show what was true. And I was like, y'all need to get some actual facts because this is crazy. I was just sitting there watching it the whole time. I was like, this is crazy. Like, no real facts. They'll see one small like footprint in the woods and they're like, that's Bigfoot. And I'm like, that
Dude,
might not be Bigfoot. Like, calm down.
You tell Papa we'll have all the answers in Mountain Gazette 206 this fall. You know, we had a reader that was at Eastern European wedding a couple years ago and was talking about this place in Montana that was knowingly polluting a river.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy at the table goes, you read Mountain Gazette? And it was like they had a real conversation because they both read this story. And what was really cool was everyone was like, send me a link, send me a link. And that's kind of where Mountain Gazette gets to be fun for our readers, is they're like, I can't send you a link. They get to kind of play in the like, you just got to buy it, dude. And that issue sold out. And it's like, should have been there. You missed the good party. Yeah. It's never going to happen again. So that's kind of our whole thing with our features.
We talk a lot about that in class, like gatekeeping, and kind of how earlier on in the action sports industry, you know, the athletes were the ones that were in charge because they were gatekeeping their own content. So they'd film videos of them surfing or skating. And, you know, back then, like, they were fully in charge of what they did. Now things are different because you could take a video of yourself doing something, but it can be shared on 10 different platforms by people that aren't you. So I think Mountain Gazette is kind of going into that gatekeeping realm where it's like you're providing the information, but you have to get it through Mountain Gazette. It's not for everyone to see.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, I think there was and Pat and I have talked about this too in a back channel, like there was a real problem with gatekeeping in some super negative ways that were racist and homophobic and misogynistic and terrible. My way of going around that is, you know, look, we are limited in our space. That's just a physical thing. That's always going to be how it is. Every issue is different because we're a product of our contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And where I have to keep just like a real check on myself is just not getting too comfortable with the same contributors writing the same stuff over and over again. So we always are trying to get extremely well-known people, you know, like the comedian Steve Martin, or super unknown underground people, or people you wouldn't expect, like Emily Liebert, who's the sex and relationship columnist for New York Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she just wrote a piece about the City Bike Boys, which is this Instagram account in New York, and the guy regrets being on social media because he's never been taken seriously by the bike industry because his joke account like went off, and like that's what he's known for now. It's sort of like reputational hit. But I think the big thing is like anyone can write for Mountain Gazette. I think everyone's got a really good story. It's really hard to line all of those things up. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of finding the right time, right place, right story.
How do you go about that, Pat, with like choosing the right story, choosing the right photos?
I think the stories are there and the stories are everywhere. That's like Mike said. I mean, it's true. The challenge we have is, in this day and age, writing isn't the profession it once was. So it's just finding people who can sit down, focus, and string a yarn together, hit a deadline. I mean, a lot of it becomes more, practical from our standpoint, and we're fortunate. I mean, our managing editor is 24 years old, and dare I say he's one of the best voices I've ever read in snowboarding. He's just got to expand his lens, and that's what's got to happen. I mean, those writers who have something to say and a will to say it and have the means and tenacity and commitment to say it are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't, because we're more of a niche than, Mike's speaking to a very specific audience that's, just more hungry and open and seeking out that sort of narrative. A lot of our readers get it for the photos, or a lot of our readers. I mean, but that said, we do a lot of writing in the house, which is the opposite of what Mike's fear is of using the same contributors. But basically it's like, what are the stories that you're not going to get on through anybody else? And there's not a lot of people going for long form storytelling for us. But what we want to do, which is similar to Mike in some regards, is when I look around other snowboarding magazines, they're largely trying to replicate whatever the social media feed that they created first is, which means they're trying to speak to a niche within a niche, whether it's, oh, this magazine is tailored more to free riders, or this magazine is tailored more to people who like hitting handrails and going snowboarding in the cities. What we're trying to be is more of a mirror as to the every rider and more not general interest, but I say not everything we do is going to speak to everybody, but there'll be something in every magazine for everyone. Mm-hmm. Not everything, but there'll be an article there. So on one page, and I talk to a lot of brands like the North Face. North Face, as much as the mainstay of their business is people who probably never step on skis or step on a snowboard, they aspire to put that out there. And particularly people who are having adventures in the mountains. That's kind of the image they want to portray. And I talk to them and they like to think that's their target consumer, that we all know it's probably, people riding bikes in New York City. But I say to them, hey, you might not speak to the kid who's hitting handrails in the streets today, but that kid's going to want to go higher. When in doubt, he's going to want to go higher and move beyond the back alleys and go into the backcountry. You're going to be there on that whole journey when you support Slush. Mm-hmm. They might not be looking as closely at your advertising or at the messaging or at the video or at the takeover, but you'll be there and you'll be ready when they're looking for you when they get to be 25, 30 years old. So that's kind of emblematic of how we approach it. And on the back end, when we're looking at our editorial, we're like, oh, we need to have a bit more free ride content. We look at it however somebody identifies, and even that comes down to geography. We just try to sit there and create a common conversation amongst all snowboarders. And we know if somebody's not interested, they're going to turn the page, but at least they have an opportunity to make that choice of whether or not they're going to turn the page, because we have inserted ourselves into their line of sight with that article. They might actively choose to turn the page, not read further, but oftentimes in a curated feed, they don't even get that choice. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big thing for us, is like, how are we balancing it? And are we trying to speak to as many people as possible with every 164 page mag that we put out there? And when we don't, we understand too. Like, if you look at the covers of all of our magazines, there's no one motif, and that's another thing that's interesting that both Mike and I benefit from. During the peak print magazine era, where newsstand was king, where there was an opportunity to make some return for the magazines as far as distribution, it was crazy how there were specialists who would try and tell you need to have listicles on the cover, or you need to have a big headline, and it was the clickbait equivalent. It was a precursor to clickbait, was every single word that appeared on the cover. Cosmo magazine. We used to go to the newsstand and count the number of times the word sex appeared on the cover of Cosmo. Mm-hmm. And I think we peaked out at 9, one issue. Wow. And that was the clickbait of its day. And now, you mentioned Mike's cover is very minimalist. It's not minimalist, it's tasteful.
Yeah.
And it's intentional. And that's kind of where we all benefit too. But why I bring that up is, if we're a little light on doing a feature story on a travel or an interview with a specific person, we will sit there and make the extra effort to say, all right, we're going to balance this with an inspirational cover photo that makes up for any deficit in editorial, because you can curry a lot of stoke and favor by highlighting something on a cover. Mm-hmm. Still. And in this day and age, what's fascinating, and Mike sees this, covers are viral. Print magazines and covers go viral, particularly with us, because we have 260 shops that tell their own communities, like Recess in North Carolina or Edge of the World, another shop in North Carolina, they'll go to social media and say, come on down, get a free copy of Slush. And that's just one part of this mosaic of virality that covers have.
So what you were saying about how like a lot of people aren't willing to sit down and write a story, I just wanted to ask you guys this because it is very
Well, they're willing to, but not a good story.
Yeah.
No.
So like right now, obviously AI is so prominent, and I think that a lot of people in our generation are kind of like straying away from it because we're like, maybe not. Like we want something that's human. So do you think that AI is something that won't really touch your industry just because it's not human, or what do you guys think about that?
We're a magazine that's messy. We're made by messy people doing messy things in the mountains and making mistakes. And I feel like it's a really good imitation. When it comes to I use the example of there was a film that came out that you probably haven't seen called Good Will Hunting.
Of course.
And, oh, you have seen Good Will Hunting. Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
We're not
Cool.
that young.
Well, you know Matt Damon's character, like he knows everything, right? He's
Mhm.
sort of like an AI, but he has no emotional center whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he is sitting there on the park bench with Robin Williams, and he's saying to them, like, you could tell me what the Sistine Chapel looks like. You could tell me all that. Like, you can't tell me what my wife's hair smelled like when we were there visiting it. Like you can't. It's just like we're really excited about AI, but I can't make it work for me. To be completely honest with you, my edit staff and I tried to train it in multiple systems, ChatGPT and Claude and all that, with my copy editor to try to replace my copy editor. And it cannot do it. It hallucinates it, and you can ask it not to hallucinate, and it will. And then it will say it didn't. It's sort of like the worst friend you've ever had your whole life. It's going to tell you it's going to stop drinking, and it keeps drinking,
Exactly.
I just think it's dog shit. I think it's going to get a little better. I want to know, when's it going to cure cancer? Why does it have to make a snowboard magazine?
Yeah.
That's the future of AI. Like, art should be made by people that need to express feelings in a unique way. And I think computers should figure out how to cure cancer.
Yeah.
I'd really like for that to happen. I feel bad doing this, but I really have to
totally
leave
good.
right now at 4.
No, you're good.
So-
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No, but Mike, I'll tell you where AI is useful for both of us.
I'll
International
side
address,
podcast.
figuring out international addresses for subscribers.
Yeah, it is pretty good for that. Yeah. Thank you guys. Sorry to run.
No, you're
you're
good.
good.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
joining.
We
It was
appreciate
great
it.
having you.
Yeah,
All right.
100%.
I'll let Pat carry on. Pat, pass my proxy. He can speak for me. Everything he says
All
is true.
right.
All right.
See you
Thank
guys.
you so much.
Bye.
Have a good
Good
one.
having
Thank
you
you.
next.
Mhm.
Always enjoy. No, I wasn't kidding. I'm using a very practical application for artificial intelligence is trying to reformat addresses that come in through our subscription platform in a way that can be manageable by the U.S. Postal Service, whether it's from Singapore or Japan or China. And I do find artificial intelligence has really improved that part of it. But a couple of years ago, I coined the phrase organic intelligence. And it was more about somebody who was creating an eco-friendly product and stuff, but taking a very cerebral approach to it. I agree with Mike. I think artificial intelligence has its place. We've actually had a couple instances in snowboarding where there's been a bit of a PR crisis for certain brands who've used artificial intelligence to replace creatives. We haven't done that. Other magazines have actually loosely in our space. But yeah, I mean, so much is to be determined. First of all, I'm a little cynical. I wonder how much of artificial that is marketed as artificial intelligence these days is something that 10 years ago would have been called an algorithm. So I also think a lot of artificial intelligence is stuff that we've already dealt with, but it's just being rebadged as artificial intelligence because it can be. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, certainly, I think where it's going to become innate, which, Mike brought up bots earlier. I mean, the people who are, using bots, buying followers, stuff like that, they're going to be the most likely to go in and try their hand at using AI. I mean, we have enough other challenges in a weather dependent space
Mm-hmm.
to deal with that doesn't include. But that said, why doesn't AI help solve climate change as opposed to speeding it up with the amount of power it
Exactly.
uses?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like AI is everywhere. Like every time I get on Facebook, I never know what's real and what's fake. And I'm like,
That's true.
why are we out here doing this fake stuff? If you're gonna create AI, maybe it could do something helpful, but we're just out here having fake videos of like an elephant breaking into somebody's house. And I'm like, what is this doing for anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that almost helps drive the point home of why stuff that's analog um, still has its place.
Yeah, I see that a lot with like some of my fellow students, like not in this class, but in classes that I've taken where, we'll get an assignment that you're totally allowed to put your own personal twist into it. You're allowed to do whatever you want, but people are like, "Oh, I'll just use chat." And I'm like, "If you want to do that, go ahead, because I'm not going to like look at you any differently, but it's not robbing AI of information, it's robbing them from information. So if
Yeah.
someone does want to use AI for everything, go ahead, but it's only limiting their own creativity, their own intelligence in certain ways. So it really it's tricky, but like you said, like the reason analog things still exist is because people still look for that. So AI might become this like new craze, but there are still going to be people that will avoid it, and that's why analog.
Yeah, it's what I'm reading into what you're saying is, AI is there and chat is there to help people get a piece of paper, but not help them learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
even if you learn,
and
it's
it's creating a world of atrophy, and we're trying to counter that. I haven't learned a phone number in 25 years.
Mhm.
That's just crazy, and I can recite phone numbers I've known for 30, .
Mhm.
So it's a weird world that we live in, but I do want to circle back to the notion of like a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, oh, so that's a little insight into the inner workings of a snowboarding magazine or a mountain lifestyle culture magazine. No, the takeaways are really about, if you have the will and you have an interest and you want to live that life that's built around that interest, like I've done, or like Mike has done, or to some extent Norm has done, find that interest and take a dive. If you have something inside you that you want to share with people, there's more opportunity than ever. I mean, and I do a lot of talks like this and tell a lot of kids, come up with a product. You don't need to make money, but the process of creating a product and creating a Shopify store, you're building your own skill set that's marketable. I mean, you can go to any town in the United States and say, I know how to build a Shopify store, and people will hire you. But whether it's music, figurines, Bigfoot, if you can do it in this day and age, there's more opportunity to create magazines and media and to expand upon the culture and the access people have to that culture than ever before. So don't think this topic isn't for you just because you don't live in the mountains or snowboard. I think there's something worthwhile to be said
Mhm.
and to get garner from this conversation, regardless of what your interest is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So piggybacking off of like the stories, there's also in your magazines, obviously photography. So like when it comes to photography, do you have certain images in mind for future publications, and how do you deal with your photography? Like, do you use freelance people or do you have your own staff, and like how do you go about picking photographs and stuff for the magazines?
Our culture has a robust pool of people who are professional photographers. Um, when there is a lot more magazines getting put out there, like at Snowboarder, some years we put out 10 different issues in a single year. We would have senior photographers and we'd rely mainly on them because that's who we're paying consistently. Um, so you want to get a return on that. But we work with contributors around the world. There's about 60 or 70 contributors who we work with. We get a submission, it's called, and we see what photos, and because so much of what we do is aspirational and inspirational, it's not necessarily based upon the narrative. I mean, if we're talking about an individual, we'll need photos of a specific individual or a specific event or a specific place. But so much of what we want to do is put photos out there that somebody would want to tear out and put on their wall, that we don't want to limit that by focusing and tying that to any sort of narrative.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure the photos are in color. We need to make sure that, the magazine down the road isn't running the same image. I mean, a lot of those practical conversations come into play. But we also do buyouts for everybody. Not all magazines do in this day and age. That's a big expense. $70,000, $100,000 a year. Yeah, no, it's there's no exact science, but also there's a lot of codes, for lack of a better word, within snowboarding, which is like good grabs, good tricks. You need to frame it in a certain way. So
just for one last question before we wrap up, I do want to ask you, if you were talking to someone our age that's interested in getting into print, what do you think you would tell them to do? What's one piece of advice?
I would tell them try to start with a website, because that's a low stakes opportunity for you to get a message out there, gather photos, gather words, create your own timeline, and also provide something that you could show people before you're sending a $30,000 check to a printer.
Yeah.
That'll help you get advertisers, so you don't put the cart before the horse.
Great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here and just being enlightened by all the information that you had to share. And we're excited to see more from Slush and obviously Mountain Gazette as well. You guys are inspiring, and it's really awesome to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, it was great to hear from both of y'all and hear your insight to your magazines and stuff. It was really great to hear.
Well, you probably see it, and where the clock's ticking, we've gone over time, and I do have another 4 o'clock that I'm late for. But you got 2 writers on the podcast, so what do you expect? We're going to go long.
Yeah, that's what matters.
That's right. We're fine to talk. So
exactly. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. Good luck with everything, and
thank you.
I appreciate Norm putting us all in touch.
We'll see you again. Thanks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our episode with Mike Rogge and Pat Bridges from Slush Magazine and Mountain Gazette. Of course, make sure to support them. Look up their websites. You can find more information about subscriptions. Thank you again to them, too. And I'll pass it on to Isabel.
Yeah, we appreciate you tuning in for this week's episode. And we'll see you next week when we host Don Meek. So see you next time.